Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? We don't have a super long agenda, but some of these topics have some time for discussion. Start real quickly with infrastructure. I don't see, oh, there's Eric. Maybe you just joined, give you a second to get online. I think the last to-do item was getting the GitHub actions that have been working on OMEC project replicated on ONO's project for the sake of SD-RAN and ROC. There is a commit, a pull request pending. I'll just reword that. I wanted to make sure that it worked for Gabriel. He was out a bit of last week, so he's going to take a look at that. And I think that is the last open issue we have for the time being. Sean, you might also take a look if you have time to. Eric, is there anything else to say about it?
No, I don't think so right now.
Yeah, I approved some of them earlier in the week. Do we know what repo this is?
This is literally
this is a new
GitHub.
repo. This is a new repo where we consolidate the GitHub actions.
Oh, yes, that GitHub. Yeah, I got it. Okay.
All right, so hopefully we'll get that all committed by the end, in the next day or so. A real quick update on on-ramp. All jobs are now passing pretty consistently, but that's because I had to do a little cheat. It's not a big cheat, but it's a little one. Whoops. What had been failing was whenever we bought Rockup before the core, that meant that all of the configuration information was available at the moment WebUI initialized. And it appears as though it started writing to MongoDB before MongoDB was ready. So I believe, and I reported this to AJ, but he's a little short on time right now. If anyone else knows how to take care of this, I think we just need a little bit of robustness that WebUI makes sure MongoDB is up and able to do a write and read it back before we start pumping config data into MongoDB. Otherwise, all the tests are pretty consistently running. I think this particular timing problem has been there for a long time and just shows up in other forms.
So Larry, I'm here. Yeah. So you have yeah. So I think there could be multiple solutions to this, maybe just don't make WebUI ready if MongoDB is not ready. That is like basic solution, or maybe don't respond quickly, make those calls as a blocking call. So you have any preference, like what kind of solution we should be going? Blocking call seems to be much better than making any ordering within the pods, right?
Yeah. I would so my proposal would be that WebUI try to write to MongoDB and read back what it wrote and just continue, a little sleep for a second and continue doing that until MongoDB is proven ready.
Okay.
Something on that order anyway. Maybe there's something easier.
Okay. Yeah, I can take a look. Maybe just give me 2-3 days. I can look at it. Yeah.
So Larry, what was the workaround that you did for the timing?
My workaround is very simple. I brought the core up before Rock.
Okay.
Whereas before I brought Rock up and it was therefore sitting there ready with data.
Right.
And the second WebUI was ready, it started reading and writing. I think we see the same thing with SimApp, except the timing works a little bit to our favor. But that would explain why we sometimes get 4 out of 5 UEs connecting and not the very first one.
Okay.
And yeah, like I said, to me, doing a write and immediately doing a read to see if you get the data back would seem to be, but maybe there's something else more complicated going on in there. Rock, there's been an issue raised of its long-term viability. Gabriel pointed out there's a bunch of Dependabot flags being
User
thrown,
alerts.
raised, and we don't really appreciate Sean's help with this, but we don't really have an active developer on Rock right now. I know that Intel Labs has made, fixes at various times, but it's not being actively maintained. So one possibility is someone steps up and wants to actively maintain it. That would be great.
Yeah, I'd just say from the Intel, like the original owners of it, really, I think there's even a reducing chance of that happening. I'm sorry to say that it's I've seen those Dependabots, and even on things that we're currently maintaining, like inside Intel, it's a weekly task to keep up to date with all of the CVEs and Dependabot tasks related to CVEs around Go. So, I think something like that, really, you need dedicated people.
Yeah.
And I mean, despite the great promise of AI tools and Dependabot and all of those kind of things, they really aren't up to that level of maintenance. So, and you saw earlier too, Larry, like the dependence on atomics, was all down to Jordan, and he doesn't have the bandwidth to follow up on it. One thing that I would say about the atomics dependency is that really atomics is an API that can wrap around many distributed storage backends, including etcd. And so, maybe if there was some bandwidth there, or somebody had a way, you could get rid of atomics and go directly to etcd. But that's really the one of the, just one of the options you have here. Obviously, there are alternatives, and if they're well supported, they might just do the job.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Larry, the other thing that we need to kind of keep in mind in here is this atomic dependency doesn't affect only the rock, but it also affects the rig as well.
That's right. That's why it's harder to move away from atomics than it is to move away from rock. Yeah.
Yeah. At the same time, it's as far as I understand with etcd, there is a one-to-one relationship between the functionality of atomics and etcd. So if you did have somebody that maybe in one of the universities or something that's supporting, it could be a good standalone task to do it on its own.
Yeah, I don't think we have Wuzhang on the call, but that would be, I mean, he does have some students that he's been working with, so that's a possibility.
Yeah, but besides that, the other thing, at least from the rock perspective, there hasn't been that much movement for a long time. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. And a couple things of improvements that the Canonical team has done on the web UI, it seems to kind of break
there's that as well.
the rock itself. So,
but Gabe, I appreciate that, but I would like to untangle atomic/SD-RAN from rock. I think rock is a standalone issue, independent of atomics. That's just another complication.
Yeah.
So Larry, have we considered using the canonical stuff? I know it's one of the questions here, right, as an alternative to the rock.
So yeah, so that's the next point. Is it is raised as a possibility. And I had a discussion with some folks at Canonical, and it's come up in this call that it is, I believe it is open source, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So it could be a good open source substitution.
It is. So the SD Core NMS, the license, let me validate, it's Apache 2. So it is open source. Right now, it wouldn't be a drop-in replacement. I'm not sure. I've not played enough with the Rock to know if we cover all the different features. Some of the features in the NMS are a bit tied to what we do with Charm Eater SD Core, so dealing with Juju integrations, things like that. It wouldn't be impossible to make it work standalone without Juju, but that would be some work that would need to happen before it can be it can be used as a replacement. But yeah, it's open source, and we would be happy that it's used in larger in a larger way. So
And just to make sure we all sort of have it plumbed into our heads in the right way here, it is related to the changes you're proposing to Web UI too, right?
well, yes and no. Some of the changes that we've done in the recent past have been tied to this. So managing inventory, for example, of UPFs and GNodeBs is directly tied to the NMS. So the NMS lets you create network slices and assign GNodeBs and UPFs directly from drop-down lists, so you can select things that the NMS knows about. So for that, we have integrations in the Charmed ecosystem. So when you deploy a UPF and a GNodeB, you can relate them to the NMS with a Juju relate, and the NMS learns about those UPF GNodeBs, puts them in its inventory, and can show it in the UI. So it's easy. You don't have to enter URLs and things like that to configure those. So some of those things we also added a feature to do what we call pebble notices. So in Charms we have this pebble PID1 that runs in all our charms, that basically acts as PID1 and manages the services, and can also wake up the charm. So we receive from the different integrations, when you write something through the web UI in NMS, it will wake up the charm, so it can send some configuration items to the GNodeB, for example, so that it can join the network slice properly. So some of those are been tied to that. What we plan on presenting later on when we get to SD Core is not directly tied to this. It's just maintenance, because Web Console is a bit wonky in places, as we all know. So we want to help on that.
Yeah, I was just looking here. It looks like it's GitHub canonical /SD core -NMS is that the right URL?
Yes. Yeah, so in that case, it might be missing some features. We could have a session at some point to discuss that and compare the two to see if it would be a good fit. But yeah, right now it's a bit tied down to our integrated product. So it wouldn't be a drop-in replacement, but I don't see anything that would prevent it from being a drop-in replacement in the future.
Yeah.
Hey, Larry?
Thanks. So we should, we're not gonna resolve this now, but let's start, ask everyone to take a look at it. And I'm sorry, Gabriel, were you about to say something?
No, I think it was somebody else, but
Somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Timon. So I guess I'm wondering, if we could step back or step up a little bit and really ask the question about what problem is Rock solving, or why does it not have any, real constituents or users right now? And that would be kind of an interesting exercise, I think. you know, I think of it as a lightweight orchestrator. I think of it as kind of an end-to-end to try and stitch together the core and the RAN. I think of it as part of the on-ramp blueprints and maybe you know, a sort of fabric for doing a lightweight private 5G. You know, are those the right ways to be thinking about it, or are there other ways to be thinking about it?
Well, I think those are all valid.
Well,
I think
I would just
be
say,
careful. I think you could do, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sean.
yeah, I was just going to say that like Rock on its own, really, I would think of as a configuration management system.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it's really trying to do. You know, you feed it with a configuration model in Yang, and it's a store, and you have an adapter on the bottom end. And there are lots of configuration management systems there. So you could separate it out, you know, in its own box and say, if I can do, if, you know, if the canonical one can do configuration management in a similar way, then it is a viable alternative. And there are many different configuration management systems out there. You know, in a previous employment, we looked at Yuma Works and systems from Cisco for doing this kind of configuration management. But I'm not sure that the open source field is has equivalents of those, and that's probably why we put together Rock, is to give us that configuration management.
Another factor here. So I mean, we've got two caveats, right? It's not a drop-in replacement. It's not a one-to-one mapping, and it's tied to a particular deployment scheme with Juju. So we need to be, you know, we might go through a period of time where they were both supported and you could pick and choose. Second point to make is, while Rock had ambitions to configure across the fabric and the core and the RAN, for all practical purposes, it was primarily configuring the core. So its ambitions were bigger than it actually delivered on that front.
Yeah, similarly, the NMS currently lets you attach a G-Node B with the PLMN and TAC to a slice, but right now it doesn't support configuring the RU, for example, so the frequencies and things like that you want to use. It's something that we have on our roadmap that we want to add in there, but it's not at this point yet, and that portion will probably be designed a lot with what we are doing with Charm.do AI RAN, where we also use Charms and Juju in there. So I'm not sure this will be easy to translate what we're planning to do on that front, but that's where we are right now with this.
But Gislan, the NMS allows you to kind of provision users, provision slices, and stuff like that related to the core, right?
Yes. Yeah, so you can create
the same thing that is happening right now with the Rock. So
yeah, so for configuring the core to create network slices, device groups, the QoS settings, I don't think we expose all of them right now. We're trying to be a bit opinionated about things and keep things as simple as possible. But we're gradually adding more stuff to that. So you can create your subscribers with IMSIs. We recently added features to generate IMSIs and keys directly in the NMS for a certain PLMN. So you don't have to just retype all of those, and you can generate secure keys. So things like that.
I just wanted to, sorry, go ahead, Larry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to bring it back to, you know, a debate that we had with Rock. I mean, you know, an NMS, generally the feature set is sort of aligned with what they call FCAPs, you know, fault configuration, accounting, I think, FCAP, yeah, performance and security. And like those FCAPs things, You know, obviously the ROC equivalent is the configuration part of that, but we always found that when we were trying to apply ROC to SD-RAN and to the core, that it was inevitably getting into kind of control rather than just pure configuration. You know, so for instance, like at what point do you stop, you know, storing all the configuration of every single aspect of your network, like, you know, all the IMSIs and all of those kind of things, and you know, get into these things are dynamically configured, and you know, we're not really they're more control than configuration, and that's kind of something that, you know, the sort of strict structure of FCAPS kind of fell down on, in my view, and is not suitable for every situation. But you know, from what you described, Ghislaine, I think, you know, you have other flows in your NMS that take care of those kind of things, and you know, maybe for that reason it would be a good solution.
Yeah, you raised an, I was gonna go back to Timon's issue. I always thought of ROC as not strictly config, because to me, config is something you do approximately once or very seldom. And this allowed for continual ongoing changes of that configuration, you know, runtime changes to the QoS or whatever. And that ROC made some conscious decisions to separate that out in certain seldom changing data. But back to Timon's point, or first question, I always expected that when people like or companies like Canonical picked up Aether, it was not surprising that they would change out the UI/GUI part, because there's a whole lot of value add going on there. But we still needed at least one example of a quasi-credible API that was open source and easy to change, so that people could try different variations on the API. I don't, back to NMS for a second. Is it easy to change the API?
The API itself reflects mostly web console. So one thing we've been doing is updating web console, making sure to add things so you can add a UPF to the inventory. So right now, the way to add a UPF to the inventory so you can add it to a network slice is with a Juju relation. But it's supported directly in the web console API to add a UPF. So there's nothing exposed right now in the UI, so you can manually add your UPF, but the API is supported in the backend.
Yeah, thanks.
Is
Just
anybody?
a question here. Are there any young models designed to control this as an API in 3GPP or somewhere? For the core, I mean?
I don't know of any.
Okay.
I mean, that
And
was
the
actually always, that was actually something we always viewed as potential value of Aether, is that it could put forward those models. And that's still, maybe there's a way to hang on to that API definition distinct from NMS versus ROC as delivering it. We should, yeah, maybe make note of that.
And the background for my question is that there is, and I put in the chat 2 links. There is in the ONA project, the SDNR, yeah, so the SDN controller for radio, they call it, and it has a ODL UX, so a GUI, but it currently allows for configuring the G-Node B, right? So it connects to RAN network functions, and it is totally a young model driven, yeah. So the configuration part itself, it's based on the young model, so it's dynamically rendered based on the young models. I don't think they have in plan yet anything about the core, so configuring the core, or so it provides an entire FCAPS functionality, not only the config part. I don't think they are thinking about the core yet, but I'm not sure if that's maybe a third option or not.
Thank you. Yeah,
Just wanted
great.
to bring to your attention this
Yeah,
project
yeah,
as well.
thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Maybe a good
also,
way to.
ask, is anybody familiar with Nefio?
I've
What?
heard of it, but never used it.
Yeah, I mean, I have the high level impression that Nefio, I think it was Google that is pushing this open source project, is kind of a Kubernetes based intent driven, configuration declaration kind of framework. And I know that there were some people kind of working, in LF and Nefio on an SD core Nefio kind of integration at one point in time.
Yeah, that was, you're right, Damon. It's driven by Google. And it's true that that was one of the, maybe not request, but the consideration from Linux Foundation, right? To have these different cores and different technologies be managed by Nefio, right? But I don't know if anybody has done any work in this space.
But my
Just
understanding
to
is
make
that
sure I
Nefio
heard, you're
is
talking
more.
about Nefio, right?
Say it again?
You were talking about Nefio.
Yes.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Nefio fills this same space, but I view it as something closer to the Juju Charm / on-ramp part of the puzzle.
I also wanted to second that. Yeah, so I think it's more like the O2 interface from the Oran architecture, right? So deploying the network functions and maybe also the core. So it's revolving around the deployment side of things.
Well, I think in some ways what this speaks to is, I mean, there probably are a number of different approaches, and probably, what we need is a stakeholder that cares, or users that are using it and are invested in, putting energy in and some ownership. And that maybe is the way we should go about thinking about this.
Yeah, and that's I think why the Canonical's option here is an attractive one.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think the other piece, the question to ask, I guess, is, Intel Labs has been a really important stakeholder here, clearly, and has had a number of different projects that are using various components. But I guess, Christian and others, there hasn't been a project or a contract where
Not on the rock, not using the rock, no.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't have. I mean, Suresh has been working a little bit on the rock because some of the work we do is NIWIC, right? We use the rock and we use, some functionality, but we are not maintaining it, right? We are not adding capabilities to the rock. It would be great if someone could do this, but we're not doing. Yeah, we don't have the resources to do it.
Right.
All right, this is a great discussion, and we will hear from Canonical on their web UI proposal, and I don't know if it makes sense to bundle this or have a separate discussion, but why doesn't everyone go away and familiarize yourself with what that option is, and familiarize yourself with Rock if you don't really know what it's doing. I obviously spelled that wrong. There it is. Okay. SD core.
Yeah, so I added the point to present our proposal for the redesign of Web Console and Config 5G. So I'm not sure if all of you know Patricia. She's here on the call. She's been working in Canonical in the same team as I am, and she's been working on that exploration and design proposal, and she will present what our proposal looks like. And we can discuss. So, Patricia.
Yes, hello. May I share my screen then?
Yeah, just a second. Yeah, go ahead.
Slideshow. I
Yep.
don't know if you are able to see my screen. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Fine. Well, hello everyone. I'm going to present the solution for the network function configuration system that we have been working for a while now. The presentation is pretty simple. I'm going to describe the current problems that we have, the proposal, and the advantages of the new solution we are proposing. The current issues, we can classify them in categories. The first one is correctness. We have seen many bugs when trying to propagate the configuration to all the network functions. The payload, all the network functions receive the exact same payload, and they receive way more than they actually need. So we can get rid of a bunch of fields there. Complexity, the code in the web console and the gRPC server are very complex and hard to understand. And the security, right now in the gRPC service, we don't have authentication or encryption, so this can be enhanced. The solution is pretty simple. It's based on polling. So here on the left, we have the web console. We want to have a new server that will run next to the existing HTTP to add your network slices and device groups, etc. And we will have the network functions making requests to this server, and the web console will respond. So it will be request response. And this is very easy to implement. And also the network functions will request only for the information they need. And this is a schema for the network functions. And they will start polling the web console at the beginning And then if we have an error or the configuration is not valid, we retry with some backup time. And if everything goes well, we store the configuration and poll again at the next interval. We've been thinking about 5 seconds for this, but we can always adjust this just a little. And what else? The idea here is for the web console to send the whole state. For example, if we have information about 5 network slices, on every request, we will send all those 5. And if a new one is added, then we will send 6, not the delta. We send always the whole state. And just what's left to define here that we can discuss is what protocol to use here. We had 2 options, either keep using gRPC, but really simplify the implementation, or use the HTTPS with REST, and we can align with what's already done in all the rest of the network functions, but this is a point that we would like to discuss with you. And yes, I was going through each network functions and try to see what information they actually need. And I came out with these 5 endpoints. And for example, 4 of them only needs the PLM and ID list, which is really small. And we can really reduce the amount of information that we send to each network function. Well, the less information we send, it's more simple, and there is less risk of making errors there. About the advantages of this solution, it's the simplicity. We will have a stateless server. Right now in the web console, we keep track of all the clients that are connected, the state of the connection. We know what type of network functions we are talking to, so we decide what type of message. So it's a lot of complexity that we can get rid of and just make request, response. And this will allow us to remove all the Go channels that makes the code hard to understand. The security, we are proposing to add TLS over the protocols. And reliability. The network functions will continue to operate with the last version they receive. So even if the web console goes down for a while or it if it misses a message, and the network will continue to work. And once the web console goes back up, it's really easy to get the latest configuration back. Backward compatibility. So we can make it very simple and just upgrade all the network functions and the web console at the same time. We will need some synchronization there. But the idea is to replace the old system with a new one. And also, depending on the protocols, there will be some changes to do in the configuration files, but it will be very small. So that's it.
A couple questions, Patricia. Regarding if we stay there, what is different? Assuming that we decide to stay with the gRPC protocol, what is different on this architecture compared to what we currently have?
Well, the current implementation is push-based. So the web console, each time if we receive a request from the HTTP server, it forwards the configuration to the network functions. And it keeps track of all the clients that are connected, and it's called a stream mode. And this will be the other way around. Instead of being the web console sending the request when it wants to send them, it will be the network functions asking for the information they need.
But isn't that what is happening right now? At least there was, a while ago, Gisland addressed an issue that the NFs were running 100% because of this gRPC connection. And then later on, there was some refactoring that Goldson did, and then this kind of bug went back again. And when I was doing that, basically, if you go into the different network functions, the whole 100% of CPU utilization on the different NFs was there because the NFs were pulling from the web console data that, there was no additional data. So from there, it seemed like actually the NFs were pulling. There was no pushing information.
Well, actually, they subscribe to the web console and the connection stays open. So it's the fact that the connection stays open. In the new configuration, it will make a call and close the connection every time.
Yeah, in the problem that was with in config 5G with the 100% CPU was not because the network function were polling web console. It's on startup, they tried to connect to web console to subscribe to configuration changes. And there's kind of a state, and until the until that connection is active, it was in a hot loop trying to reconnect to get an active connection to web console. And the issue was just that there was no interval set in that loop, so it was just constantly trying to reconnect. But once that initial connection to web console is set up, it's basically just sending one request to web console. I want to subscribe to network configuration changes, and the web console, whenever it has changes, it will send it. So on the initial connection, it will send the whole configuration, but after that, it will just send deltas. So there might be some issues also that happen where one network function, if you drop some packets on the gRPC, you might miss one update.
Okay.
So that's a bit different on that front.
Oh, okay. Cool. Thanks.
I have a few questions. So, first of all, thank you for showing the courage of doing this change, because it takes a lot of energy to change this web console. I think whatever you have highlighted, over the period of time, it became very bulky, and the design was very bad at some point in time. So now this is good change, but are you guys going to change the NF endpoints as well? Especially the SMF, it's still complex in terms of how it handles the configuration update. AMF, I believe it's relatively straightforward, but SMF backend it's completely written based on the update it receives, and it finds out the delta and all those things. So as a part of this change, you will take care of the NF changes as well?
Yeah, well, I made the work to go through all these, each network function, and to me the more complex was the PCF because the amount of
I see.
information that it needs. But also the complexity there is right now, I said they try to identify the delta, like was this network slice added, was it updated, was it deleted, and it makes the decisions about it. The idea here is to overwrite everything. Like I get rid of everything I had before, and I just consider the new configuration. So like this, it's easier, and it's less probably trouble to make mistakes.
Okay, maybe I think when you have some code or something, I can review. So I have the other question is that web console is going to keep the information locally, or for every polling it goes to DB and get the info locally in memory and then send it down to NF?
Well, that depends. That part I haven't really thought about. Well, I have some thoughts about it, but I don't have a decision about that. I think that going through the database every time can be unnecessary. Right now, what the web console does is at the beginning of the program, it fetches all the information it needs from the database, and then it updates it as needed, like some type of cache. And I think we could go with that.
Okay, sounds good. And one additional question, right? Like now each NF is asking us different information. So does this mean like within web console you will have the configuration copies relevant to each NF, or you will create those details on the fly?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Okay,
You are worried
so
about the data?
yeah, some part of information is, let's say, needed for NF1, some information is required for NF2. So are you going to keep this data ready for the NF1 and NF2, or you go over all the configuration to figure out what needs to be sent to NF1 or what needs to be sent to NF2? Or other way to ask is that in the web console you have the this kind of data structure where the configuration is split per NF, or you have the single big bulky config?
Well, to me, the web console doesn't care what network functions, but what endpoint will be
Okay,
used.
yeah.
So it will
Okay.
respond according to that.
Okay, so you will have the copies per endpoint.
Yes.
Okay. And one more question. I think I'm just trying to see like what other things we have. We have some functionality within the web console where it goes and makes some calls to CMAP or maybe ROC or something. Do we intend to keep that code as is, or that just goes away? On the startup, I think this code is mostly on the startup to just indicate and get the pull, because web console is also downstream compared to CMAP and ROC, right? So we have the functionality where as soon as web console comes up, it calls the API to pull the config from the northbound interface. So it's on startup here.
I briefly look at that part of the code this morning, but I'm not familiar with that part.
Okay. Assuming that you are not changing the startup sequence, I think it sounds good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that the startup sequence will need to change at all. So I see that similar to how we use Web Console, where on startup we load the config from the database before doing anything. So in that case, on startup it gets the config from the ROC. So I don't see that needing any change. And you ask if we plan on doing the work on those different NFs. So that's exactly right. In the next in the next 6 months, so for our next 6-month cycle, what we plan to do is once we have an agreement on this, is to start the work on web console and all DNFs. If we want to keep that simple as Patricia presented, we would like to do all the changes and kind of synchronize to merge those all at once and cut a new release with that. That would be the simplest solution. Otherwise, we need to kind of build some backwards compatibility in place. So there's that those kind of details will need to also be discussed on how we want to do things exactly, but that's on our roadmap to implement this.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm good. Yeah.
I have a quick question. So for this kind of scenarios, does polling is a better way to go, or like we can have a pops up kind of thing where if anything changes in the web console, then it can like send data directly to the network functions that have registered for the particular configuration, because like polling might increase after interval redundant request or something. Just like putting idea there. I
Yeah,
mean,
you're proposing like a mix of pushing and polling.
correct. Initially, I mean, you poll, of course, because you don't have any configuration. But after that, when web console has something, if a network function exists, then if anything changes in the configuration, then you can directly push it to the network function, rather than like after every interval, network function pulls it.
Yeah, that's true. Like once you have your configuration defined, and if you don't change anything, it can be inefficient. But if you choose simplicity,
Correct.
this is the way to go to me.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, fair enough.
Do you have any more questions? Or do you have an opinion about the protocol to use here? Do you want to keep gRPC or HTTP, or especially
gRPC is
regarding
good.
users?
What's your timeline? Your roadmap timeline?
We're talking cycles of 6 months on our side. This will be on our roadmap. The timeline to work exactly on this inside the next 6 months, I can't say for sure right now.
Okay, so
but,
6 months.
Yeah, this might come early in the cycle that starts in like 2 weeks. So this might come early if we're already aligned on things. We could be able to start early, depending on other priorities. But right now we haven't planned exactly when it will happen in the cycle.
Okay, thanks. So I wasn't taking any particular notes there. Did you get some helpful feedback on the concerns of, I guess it's a lot of the tangential issues. The design itself is, I think everyone's good with, but everything else that gets touched, whether it's SIMAP on one side or the NFs on the other, did you get the feedback you needed there?
Yes.
Yeah, so for the startup sequence, that was a good point around making sure that the ROC and SIMAP startup sequence still works fine, and I think that won't be a problem. And there was some questions around if the design itself was something that the TST would be happy with, and also around the protocol choice. So I think Larry, you said that keeping gRPC there is fine. There's also an opportunity to switch to HTTP, like all the network interface network functions already talk HTTP for the SBI. So there was this option also on the table. But if we want to keep gRPC, I think both are equally simple to implement, right, Patricia?
Yes.
Question: Is there any reason we want to keep gRPC?
Not
The
exactly
question
because
is for
I use.
everybody. No, it's not just for you, Patricia. So
Okay.
in general, because we're already using the HTTP for everything else, right? So especially the all the service-based interface is is based on HTTP. So that's what I'm kind of wondering whether anyone has any opinion about keeping gRPC.
Well, that's why they asked the question, and I jumped in probably too quickly, saying gRPC sounded like a good idea, but consistency with everything else also makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, gRPC can be a bit more efficient, but we're talking about we're removing some data that, for example, the AMF was receiving a lot of data, but it only needs a PLMN. So and well, a PLMN, SNSS, AI, and TAC. So it will be a lot smaller payloads that we send, so the efficiency will not be as big. The efficiency gain will not be as big, and it's not a performance critical part of the whole process. So this is not something that will make network attachment faster. So for that, it's a small gain for gRPC. For consistency with the rest of the NFs, it might be a bigger argument, because we already use GIN everywhere for the HTTP framework. So it's already used in Web Console for the HTTP API. So it would remove some dependencies from the code also. So this could help produce dependency work.
Yeah, and just one additional thing, if Gabriel, if do you think that there is a gain in like maybe Intel Lab working on the UPF config portion, because UPF has been left out of all this configuration option throughout. Now is the time probably even UPF can start pulling the config.
Um,
Maybe
yeah,
at least evaluating if that's easy or something.
I think we can try to take a look at that, but I'm not sure whether we're gonna have the time to,
I see.
work on this, in the sense that we have a few other projects that we're working on. That's kind of what is taking most of our time, and that's kind of the reason that why we are bringing the issue with the rock, in the sense that we want just to use, because we don't have bandwidth to work on the rock itself. So we can try to take a look into what is needed from the UPF side, but I'm not sure whether we're going to have enough bandwidth. But certainly we can take a look.
Sure. Yeah, and I have one wish list, maybe canonical team, you can evaluate if that's possible. At some point in time, like I thought like when we create the slice, we are reusing the same network function. In future, in case like creating a new slice means spinning up the new instances, if that's what we come up with, then the pooling of the config should happen only for the network slice which NF is supporting. So that means these APIs, if they can have the slice ID somewhere, like if it is not provided, then give me config for all slice, or if it is provided, then that network function is interested in only specific slice, right? So that really becomes a possibility of extension of the same framework.
Okay,
So some of the
you mean
NF
an
may come
SMF?
only for. Mhm.
You mean that, for example, in SMF, you deploy an SMF that will only handle slice 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
so you
something
can,
like
that
that.
SMF can request only that information, right?
Yeah, I think when you're designing APIs, if that can be a possibility, it would be really helpful, especially like if we want to isolate NFs per slice. Yeah.
I think this could be easily extendable.
Okay.
The new protocol would be a lot more simple. It's basically if we're going, I sense that we want to go with HTTP and REST. So adding an endpoint that can take a slice ID or something would not be too difficult to filter the list.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks. Yes.
Thank you. Great work.
So I heard changes required in the NFs. That was, to me, going to be a substantial part of the challenge. Did I get that wrong?
Yes, I know there are many changes because there are many NF, but in fact the changes are small.
Okay, thanks. Change. So all NFs will need to change. I'm just making a note here. The changes are small.
Yes.
That's what I couldn't gauge. All right, well, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you very much. Could I have you attach your slide deck to this to the notes here
Yes.
somewhere?
I can send
Or
it.
send it to me and I can do that. Just so we have, just so we have record of it. Oh, there's
Well,
the
it's private only to me. I need to fix that, but
all right. Well, we can do that. We can do that offline. There is. I now see there is one more bullet. Was that you? The creating minor releases, Gabriel?
Yeah, that's just gonna provide an update of what we were doing since probably the last meeting. So there is all the auxiliary repositories basically have now new minor releases. We need to start kind of creating minor releases for the network functions because they are up to date, but there is a few PRs that need to be merged before that. So actually, Patricia has one PR that improvements on one of the testings in the SMF. And there is another PR pending in the AMF. I believe it comes from the iOS team in India. So I was trying to kind of have those merged before we create the minor releases for this. But then after that, we can create a minor release, including the Helm charts for the SD core.
Okay, thanks for the update. Is there anything else? All right,
No.
thanks everybody for your attention, and we'll meet in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
thank you.
Bye.